The airlock hissed open, and Victoria Kane stepped onto Zenith Corridor. 7 with her security detail flanking her, in perfect formation. The neutral station hung in the void between territories, a massive ring of metal and light that had hosted every major galactic treaty for 3 centuries. Victoria's heels clicked against the polished floor as alien dignitaries turned to watch her approach. Some had scales, others had features that shifted like water. A few possessed so many limbs she couldn't count them all. She was the first human queen to stand before the Council of Sentient Species, and every eye in the chamber was measuring her worth. Her advisor, Commander Jake Morrison, leaned close as they walked. "Your Majesty, the Veltheran delegation just arrived. They're setting up in the council chamber now." Victoria nodded, keeping her expression neutral. 3 months of preparation had led to this moment. Humanity had been petitioning for full council membership for 2 years. Ever since their colonies expanded beyond the outer sectors, they needed access to advanced technology, trade agreements, and most importantly, protection under galactic law. Without it, human settlements were vulnerable to raider attacks and territorial disputes with no legal recourse. The council chamber was a circular auditorium with seating that rose in tiers around a central platform. Representatives from 47 species filled the space, their translators creating a low hum of converted speech. Victoria took her position on the platform, her dark suit a stark contrast to the colorful robes and biological displays around her. That's when she saw him. The Veltheran sat in a designated booth that overlooked the entire chamber. His skin was pale blue, almost translucent, and his eyes were completely black. No iris, no white, just bottomless darkness. He wore simple gray robes, and his hands were folded in his lap. He wasn't looking at Victoria. He was looking through her. "Your Majesty," the council speaker began, his translation device rendering his clicking language into smooth English. "Before we proceed with your petition, you must undergo the protocol of transparent intent." Victoria's throat tightened. "I wasn't informed of any additional protocols. It is standard for all species seeking membership." The speaker gestured toward the Veltheran. "Kyrith of the Veltheran Communion will read your surface thoughts during these proceedings. This ensures honesty and prevents deception. Do you consent?" Every human instinct screamed at her to refuse. Her thoughts weren't just her own. They contained military deployments, defense strategies, locations of Earth's hidden fleet positions, personal fears, memories she'd buried, the face of her daughter in the moment before the transport exploded. But if she refused, humanity's petition would be denied before it even began. "I consent," Victoria said. The chamber fell silent. Kyrith stood slowly, his movements fluid and deliberate. He descended from his booth and approached the platform until he stood 10 feet from Victoria, his black eyes fixed on her, and she felt something brush against her mind, like cold fingers trailing across her skull. "Begin!" the council speaker said. Kyrith's voice entered her thoughts directly, bypassing her ears entirely. "I will not take what you do not think, Queen Victoria Kane, but I will see what surfaces in this moment. The council will know if you hide malice or ambition that threatens galactic peace." Victoria forced herself to breathe normally. She thought of the colony children who needed medical technology humans didn't possess. She thought of the mining accidents that killed workers because human shielding was generations behind council standards. She thought of her duty. "The human petition requests full membership status," the council speaker announced. "State your case, Queen Kane." Victoria began to speak, outlining humanity's contributions to border security, their resource management, their cultural diversity. But even as she spoke, she felt Kyrith pulling at the edges of her consciousness. Memories flickered unbidden. Her coronation, the war council meetings, her daughter's laugh. No, not that. Anything but that. But the mind doesn't obey commands when a telepath is watching. The memory surfaced like a drowning victim breaking the water's surface. 11 months ago, the colonial transport returning from Europa Station, a faulty containment seal in the cargo bay. 37 people dead in the explosion, including her 15-year-old daughter Emma, who had begged to visit the ice mining facilities for a school project. Victoria's voice didn't waver as she continued her presentation, but inside her mind she was screaming. She saw Emma's face, heard her voice asking why they couldn't just buy better ships from the council species. Felt the weight of the flag-draped casket at the state funeral. In his position across the platform, Kyrith went completely still. His black eyes widened almost imperceptibly. The council members began to murmur among themselves. The speaker raised one of his forearms for silence. Kyrith, what do you see? The telepath didn't answer immediately. His gaze remained locked on Victoria, and she felt him moving deeper, past the surface thoughts into the foundations of who she was. She wanted to resist, but knew it would only make things worse. So she let him see. He saw the weight of the crown, the impossible decisions. The night she'd signed the execution order for a human terrorist who'd killed alien diplomats, knowing it would prevent war but cost her sleep for months. Parasynthoids are reviewing casualty reports from border skirmishes. He saw her, alone in her quarters, staring at Emma's picture, wondering if she'd failed as both a mother and a queen. And he saw something else, something Victoria herself barely recognized. Every death report she read, she felt. Every colonist who died from preventable causes because humanity lacked advanced medicine, she carried their names. Every child orphaned in the border raids, she remembered their faces from the refugee reports. It wasn't duty. It wasn't political calculation. It was pain, raw and visceral, as if each loss had happened to her personally. Kyrith stumbled backward. His pale blue skin had gone almost white. The chamber erupted. Council members rose from their seats, demanding to know what the telepath had found. The speaker's translator crackled with urgency. Kyrith, you must report. What secrets does the human queen hide? The Veltheran's voice came out hoarse, spoken aloud instead of telepathically. She hides nothing. Impossible, declared a reptilian council member. All species hide something. What are the humans planning? Kyrith's black eyes finally released Victoria. He turned to face the council, and she saw something in his expression she couldn't name. Horror? Wonder? The humans plan to protect their people. They seek technology to prevent the deaths that haunt their queen. But there is something else, something I have never encountered in 10,000 years of reading minds across this galaxy. The chamber held its breath. Humans feel other beings' pain as if it were their own, Kyrith said quietly, not metaphorically, not as political calculation. They psychologically experience the suffering of others with the same intensity as their personal losses. This queen carries the weight of every human death under her rule, as if she had lost her own child 37 times over. Silence crashed through the council chamber like a physical force. An insectoid representative clicked rapidly, its translator struggling to keep pace. That's impossible. No species could function with such psychological burden. They would collapse under the weight of empathy. And yet they do not collapse, Kyrith said. They endure it. They choose to feel it. I found memories of human soldiers throwing themselves on explosive devices to save alien refugees they'd never met. Human doctors working themselves to death in quarantine zones treating diseases that only affected other species. This capacity for empathy exists alongside an equally intense capacity for violence. The contradiction is... He paused, searching for words. Terrifying, finished a crystalline being whose voice chimed like broken glass. Broken glass! A species that feels so deeply could be catastrophically unstable. If we harm something they love, they would burn the galaxy to ash. Victoria found her voice. We've also built the galaxy up from ash. 3 times. We've destroyed ourselves in global wars and rebuilt every time, each time learning to carry more, feel more, protect more. Yes, we're dangerous when threatened, but we're also the only species that will die for complete strangers, simply because we couldn't live with ourselves if we didn't. The council members erupted into debate. The arguments flew in dozens of languages, but Victoria caught the central thread. Humanity was too volatile, too emotional. Too intense. They could destabilize centuries of carefully maintained galactic peace simply by existing in their current psychological state. The speaker called for order repeatedly before the chamber finally quieted. This is unprecedented. We must vote on whether humanity's emotional extremes constitute a threat to galactic stability. Wait, Victoria said. You've seen my thoughts. You know we're not seeking domination. We're seeking survival. Our people are dying from problems you solved centuries ago. If empathy makes us dangerous, then punish us for that. But don't let children die because their queen feels too much. Kyrith moved to the center of the platform, standing beside Victoria. Council Speaker, I request permission to share one more memory. You've broken enough protocols today, Kyrith. I invoke the witness right. What I have seen demands the full council's attention. The speaker's translator sputtered before rendering his reluctant agreement. Granted, but this is highly irregular. Kyrith turned to Victoria. I need your permission. The memory from 8 months ago. The refugee ships at the border. Victoria's heart clenched. She knew which memory he meant. She nodded. The telepath's power expanded through the chamber, and suddenly every council member was experiencing Victoria's memory as if it were their own. They felt the panic as 3 unmarked ships appeared at the edge of human territory, fleeing from a border conflict between 2 minor species. They experienced the split-second decision as Victoria ordered the defense fleet to stand down, despite not knowing if the ships were hostile. They felt her terror as the ships approached populated human colonies, and they felt what happened next. The ships were filled with civilian refugees, mostly children, from a species humans had never encountered before. They were starving and sick. Victoria had ordered every available medical team to the border. Human doctors had worked for 72 hours straight, some dying from exposure to unfamiliar pathogens, to save as many of the alien children as possible. 14 humans had died treating species they'd never met, expecting no reward, receiving no recognition from the species being saved. They'd done it because the alternative was letting children die, and humans couldn't live with that choice. The memory released and the council sat in stunned silence. An avian representative with golden feathers finally spoke. Why? Those refugees meant nothing to your species. No alliance, no treaty, no benefit. Your people died for strangers. Because they were dying, Victoria said simply. What other reason do we need? The vote took 3 hours. Victoria stood on the platform the entire time, feeling Kyrith's presence at the edge of her thoughts. He didn't probe anymore, just observed, as if trying to understand a puzzle that had no solution. When the council speaker finally rose, his 4 arms spread wide. By a vote of 32 to 15 with unanimous support required for full membership, humanity's petition is denied. Victoria's chest tightened. She'd failed. All of this, all the exposure, all the pain, and she'd still failed her people. However, the speaker continued, by a vote of 41 to 6, the council grants humanity provisional membership status. You will have access to medical technology, trade agreements, and legal protection under council law. Full membership will be reconsidered in 5 years, pending humanity's demonstration of stability. Relief flooded through Victoria so intensely she nearly staggered. Provisional status was enough. It was more than enough. Human children would live. The colonies would have protection. Emma's death wouldn't be meaningless if it had led to this moment. The council began to disperse, representatives filing out in clusters, already forming new political alliances based on how they'd voted. Victoria stood alone on the platform, watching them go. Kyrith approached her one final time. Up close, his black eyes reflected her image, like dark mirrors. You should know something, Queen Victoria, he said quietly. The council granted your petition not out of mercy, but out of fear. Fear of what? Of what you might become if they refused. There are beings on this council who have committed atrocities you cannot imagine. They voted to accept humanity because they saw in your thoughts what humans would do if someone they loved was truly threatened. The refugee memory convinced them that human compassion could benefit the galaxy, but it was the depth of your grief that terrified them into cooperation. Victoria met his gaze. You're saying they voted yes because they're afraid we'll seek revenge if they harm us. I'm saying the galaxy now understands that humans don't just seek revenge. They absorb the pain of loss so completely that they become something else entirely when protecting what they love. That transformation is what frightens them, and perhaps what will keep your people safer than any fleet. He turned to leave, then paused. I've read the thoughts of every species in this galaxy, Your Majesty. I have seen minds that calculate, minds that hunger, minds that dream, but I have never seen a mind that bleeds for others the way humans do. I don't know if that makes you the galaxy's salvation or its doom. Neither do I, Victoria admitted. Kyrith inclined his head in something like respect. Then we'll discover it together. The Council will be watching humanity very carefully now. They've seen what you can feel. Now they need to see what you'll do with that capacity. He left her standing alone on the platform. Through the massive viewport, Victoria could see Earth in the distance, a blue marble suspended in darkness. Somewhere down there, in a cemetery outside London, a headstone bore her daughter's name, Emma Kane, who had died because humanity lacked the technology to build safe transport ships. That technology was being transferred now. The provisional membership guaranteed it. Victoria touched her fingers to her lips, and then to the viewport, a gesture Emma would never see, but one that felt necessary anyway. The pain of loss sat in her chest like a stone, but alongside it was something else: purpose. The weight of all those other parents who wouldn't have to bury their children because of outdated technology. The relief of colonists who would receive medicine that actually worked. The hope of a species that had finally, barely earned its place among the stars. The galaxy held its breath, Kyrith had said. Now it exhaled, accepting humanity with cautious, fearful welcome. And Victoria Kane, Queen of Earth and the Terran Federation, carried the weight of that acceptance like she carried everything else, as a burden she would bear gladly, painfully, completely, because the alternative was letting her people face it alone. She walked off the platform toward where Commander Morrison waited with the security detail. His expression was carefully neutral, but she saw the question in his eyes. "We got provisional status," she said quietly. "The technology transfers begin immediately." Morrison's shoulders relaxed almost imperceptibly. "That's more than we hoped for, Your Majesty." "Yes." Victoria glanced back at the empty council chamber one final time. "They're afraid of us, Jake. Afraid of what we might do if we're pushed too far." Kyrith made sure they understood that. "Is that a bad thing?" Victoria considered the question as they walked through the corridors of Zenith. 7, past aliens who now looked at her with new wariness, new respect, new calculation in their eyes. "I don't know, but it might be the only thing that keeps us alive long enough to prove we deserve to be here." The transport back to the human flagship was silent. Victoria spent the journey staring out at the stars, thinking of Emma, thinking of all the children who would live because of today. Thinking of the impossible weight of feeling too much in a galaxy that felt too little, somewhere in his quarters on Zenith. 7. Kyrith sat in darkness, his black eyes closed, still processing what he'd found in the human queen's mind. In 10,000 years, he'd never encountered anything like it. The intensity, the pain, the choice to feel when it would be so much easier to go numb. He opened his eyes and looked out at the same stars Victoria was watching from her transport. The galaxy had accepted humanity today, but acceptance and understanding were different things. He'd shown the Council what humans could feel, but he hadn't shown them everything. He'd kept one memory private, locked away where even his telepathic oath couldn't compel him to share it. The memory of Victoria's last thought before he'd released her mind. The thought that had shaken him more than the grief, more than the empathy, more than the protective fury he'd glimpsed. It was simple, quiet, absolute. "If anyone harms my people again, I will feel their pain as my own, and I will make certain the ones responsible feel it too." Not a threat. Not a promise, just a statement of inevitable fact, delivered with the certainty of gravity. Kyrith understood now why the Council had voted to accept humanity. They'd seen the same thing he had. A species that loved so fiercely it would burn itself to ash to protect what mattered. A species that carried the weight of strangers as if they were family. A species that chose to feel everything even when the feeling destroyed them, because the alternative was losing their humanity entirely. The galaxy had held its breath today. Tomorrow, it would have to decide if humanity's intensity was a gift or a weapon. And Victoria Kane, standing on the bridge of her flagship as Earth grew larger in the viewport, already knew the answer. It was both. It had always been both. And now, the galaxy would have to learn to live with that truth.